Good evening, everybody. Mike Naso here from IPR365.com with the latest on the tropics, and it is very active. We are only into the latter portion of July, nowhere near August or the climatological peak, but taking a look out there in the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific, we have three features. First of all, obviously, this big donut on the left side of the screen is an extremely dangerous Category 4 Hurricane Dora, which thankfully will just miss the Baja of Mexico down here. We have Tropical Storm Brett still hanging on as a tropical storm way out here in the western Atlantic. This is going to jettison on off towards the northeast, and we won't have to deal with it. And then you can see moving off the screen here, this little doodad is actually Tropical Storm Cindy, our third named storm, which developed in the last 24 hours there. And we are watching yet again another tropical wave enter the picture here, and this is forecast to continue to move west-northwest, maybe a little bit further north than that, and there is some low chance that it could slowly develop, but nothing is imminent by any means at this time. But let's start with Brett since it's closest to home at least. This is as of 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Brett was at 34.2 north, 69.7 west. Winds were down to 40. Had been up a few days ago, closer to hurricane strength. And it's a really tenacious system, but we just haven't had the favorable conditions to allow it to develop. And it is moving on off towards the east-northeast at 10, and that pressure 1,007 millibars. And again, the model guidance is pretty straightforward. North of Bermuda, with the exception here of the GFDL, which wants to clip Cape Cod and take it to Maine. Even if that were somehow the case, that would probably be some kind of elongated remnant of whatever was even a tropical depression at that point. But that's not going to happen. It's going to continue on off towards the east-northeast and within 5 days be way off the screen here into the North Atlantic. And we won't have to deal with Brett at all. You can see Brett right now is an exposed weakening vortex continuing that slow but steady movement on off towards the east-northeast. And again, the thunderstorm clusters here are trying to fire over the center. It would love to do what Hurricane Alex did about 7 years ago and become a major hurricane as it pulls away from the eastern seaboard, but that's not able to occur in this case because of the wind shear from the northeast up to 30 knots. That's pretty intense wind shear for any tropical cyclone, let alone a minimal tropical storm. Now, Cindy's stronger. It's at 42.3 north, 45.0 west. Winds are still 60 miles per hour, gusting to 70. It's moving northeast very quickly at 27 miles an hour. And so the contrast with Brett is that it's better organized, stronger, further north, and moving faster. So there is some kind of contrast between the two. The interesting thing is Cindy actually doesn't look half that bad, and it's much further north, moving much quicker than Brett. Brett is down here over warmer waters, much closer to land, but Cindy's actually a lot more favorable than Brett is at this point, which is interesting. You can see the model guidance continues to push it off, and whatever's left, look at this. I don't even remember seeing models take systems into Germany like this, but some of the BAMs, the BAM medium, BAM deep, do have whatever comes of Cindy, making it all the way into Eastern Europe. So that's interesting. It'd be interesting to see how far some of these systems could go, the remnants at least of tropical cyclones. Now again, Cindy at this hour is actually looking very good. It appears to be wrapping up its center. It's trying to pop out an eye, and there is the chance that if it rounds out an eye and looks favorable enough, maybe it can get up to 70, maybe achieve minimal hurricane strength. But at this point you can see it's getting impacted and jettisoning on off at 27 miles an hour so fast that I don't think Cindy has any shot of becoming a hurricane that's realistic. Is there the outside possibility that as this wraps up into an eye, it became a hurricane and then it moved out? Yes, but very, very slim at this point in time. Now you can see on the 19th we had this tropical wave I mentioned in the central Atlantic, and taking a look at it now, it's obviously made that west-northwest movement pretty steadily gaining latitude, and that is expected pretty much to continue. It's not an invest yet, but it will likely become an invest over the next, say, 24 hours. And right now, wind shear for the system, believe it or not, is not all that unfavorable. It's actually got a little safe harbor here, and it could carry this with it the next few days, and waters are warm. Now in contrast, look at Brett up here getting this enormous high pressure pushing the shear right from the northeast over the top of it. Cindy's off the screen, but it did have a little bit of a safe harbor before these winds came on to push it on off. But to be honest, the Atlantic Basin is looking somewhat favorable. I'm really impressed with it. We do have low shear over much of the Gulf and the Bahamas and the Western Atlantic here. Unfortunately, Cindy's moving out and away, and Brett's in a bad environment for strengthening. But you can see how the high pressure is definitely playing a role with that northeast shear over Brett, with very favorable conditions underneath it. That's why when we get high pressure aloft over a hurricane, and you get a flow like this around the storm that ventilates it, it's very favorable. But when it's directly into the system, as is the case with Brett, it is not. But our system out here in the Central Atlantic, look at how favorable the Central Atlantic is. This does not bode well for it only being July 21st. And if it's August 21st, and it's even more favorable than this, you might want to keep an eye out. Some of the longer range models have been hinting we could get our first Cape Verde hurricane, which could perhaps be the first hurricane of the season, within about a 10 to 12 day period. That was a long range GFS earlier this morning in some of its runs. So we're going to be watching that very carefully. Now we're also watching this. This is Hurricane Dora. And you can see this is a phenomenally strong hurricane. Almost was a Category 5 earlier. Had been up 155 miles an hour. Now it's back down to 150, but not a big difference there. Gusting up to 185 miles an hour. If anybody was in that eye wall, it would be devastating. 150 mile per hour landfalls are rare. They have occurred, but they are rare. Andrew in 92 was an example of a hurricane that was 165 miles an hour, and we saw the result of that. Actually, Hurricane Charlie in 2004, the last Category 4 to hit the U.S., had these same wind speeds, 150 sustained, and the gusts, they had gusts as high as 180, 185, unofficial, in areas of, say, Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda, and that is right on tap with what you get with a 150 mile an hour hurricane. But luckily Dora is away from land, moving northwest at 932 millibars. Very intense hurricane. It is closing in on the Baja, and we do have the hurricane watches and warnings with the expectation that winds may buffet it come Saturday as the system's weakening and expanding out a little bit and making its closest approach. But nonetheless, Hurricane Dora is not going to make landfall in Mexico, and folks should be thankful for that, because taking a look at it, you can see it is a very impressive storm. And I put on the sea surface temperatures, and you can see it's starting to weaken. Clearly the eye is not as impressive. It's starting to break apart a little bit here. It's feeling the effects of not wind shear for sure, but more stable air, more cooler waters. You can see these 30 degrees Celsius waters it was over, 29 degree when it was a Category 4, borderline 5 this morning. Look at the sharp contrast all the way down to 22 degrees out here. So that's a big difference, and Dora is going to feel that, and I think it is as it crosses this line from 29 to 28. Soon it'll be 27, 6, and 5, and those cooler waters very quickly will weaken Hurricane Dora. But nonetheless, a very impressive Category 4 hurricane, the second Category 4 after Hurricane Adrian of the Eastern Pacific season. Will we see stuff like this in the Atlantic come 30, 40 days from now? I have a feeling we will. Let's just hope it's not closing in on land. I'm Mike Naslip from IPR with the latest on Brett and Cindy as well as Hurricane Dora. Stay tuned to IPR365.com.